Well, to get tonight started, you may remember last night we went over the introduction and the concept, some of the basic rules that are presented for strongholds in this book. And then we went into the first example of a stronghold, which was the keep, as well as its two variants, the barbarian camp and the pirate ship. Now, it does make reference to rules that will be coming out later, but it does a good job at making a line in the sand and saying this is our starting point. This is why we chose it, and if you want to modify it, it's up to you. And here are some things to think about: attracting followers or protectors, homesteaders to your keep, which types, and how a fortified keep on a hill could differ from a roaming barbarian camp, or even the example of the pirate ship that they offered. So there are many different styles to be presented in here, and through it all, I believe that Mr. Colville has done a good job of saying this is based on my opinion, my experience, just my own sense of the game, while trying to anchor it in various fantasy mechanics. And encouraging you to be flexible with your own thinking. If you don't like something in here, change it. If you think to make a level 1 keep, it takes more than 150 days with X amount of laborers and such. Remember, these are perfect conditions. Then in an imperfect world, adjust it as you see fit. And I want to make sure that we are remembering that as we are going through the document. That we are... we may run into disagreements with what's presented here. Though there's room aplenty for us to discuss options or different ways to build upon it. And you know what? If we get ideas, I know Fluffy Sheep, if there's a particular way that we can work something into a campaign, because you're saying, well, I don't see that content in here right now. I'm getting stats, I'm getting just sort of a presentation, but I'm not feeling the interaction with the campaign. And I know I tried to, well, but there's the Siege of Castle Rend. That's a campaign, and as we continue to explore the document, we'll see if you end up being satisfied, and if not, well, your voice is important and your opinions are important, as any sort of feedback would be for us as a community. Or I don't know if Mr. Colville or anyone else who's out there would end up seeing this broadcast here on Twitch or later on YouTube. But all feedback is welcome, and because this is a conversational table at which we're sitting. All right, so look at all this progress. We got to page 22. Let's go to it. The Tower. Magic is dangerous, unpredictable. On Tuesday shows that off. But there's something even more dangerous: magical research. This is why wizards and other arcane spellcasters put their towers far away from civilization, so they can experiment, and if they summon something with a number of tentacles and eyeballs that can only be expressed through the use of imaginary numbers, the only person who ends up wearing their organs on the outside is the hapless wizard who failed to say all the right words in the right order. Mind you, lots of big fantasy cities have towers full of wizards, but I always assume that comes with the danger of occasionally summoning hordes of unspeakable monstrosities from the world below. I mean, you've got all the knights sitting around, might as well give them something to do. Founding a tower unlocks battle magic for them, and grants the arcane spellcaster the power to research new spells. And if you use our rules, there's a 0% chance things could go wrong. Well, it's close to 0%. I don't know your GM. Yes. Good. Spell research. Remember, from the Foundation concept, if a character owns a tower, that character can receive a benefit from the tower. That can be recharged if the character returns back to it and spends a week in the... I was going to say the establishment. That's a type of stronghold. In the stronghold, to interact, to research, and to sort of prep and gear up. I see you, cat. I know you're sniffing around. She smells chocolate brownies. And she's sniffing for him, but she can't have him. She may show up on screen. We'll see. We know player characters can invent spells. We see them throughout the text of the core game. Famous wizard PCs in the 1970s and the spells their players invented have been with us for the entire history of the game. So we know it can be done, and it has been done. But back in the day, the player would just tell the GM what their idea for a spell was, and the GM would come up with some suitably dangerous and heroic quest to acquire the ingredients and lore for the research, and then, quest complete, the GM would figure out the level of the spell to balance it. You can still do this, and indeed, you don't really need rules for it. It's the kind of thing you do because there are no rules for it. And, Fluffy Sheep, it sounds like that's what you were hinting at yesterday. The core books have rules for creating new spells, but they're in the back, and I don't get the sense they're widely used. They also rely on a combination of player initiative. First, think of the new spell that isn't already covered by one of the hundreds in the game, and GM approval, and the GM has to find a way to balance it, which is probably not fun. And if you're already doing that, do you need those rules? They're mostly just guidelines for how much damage spells do at which level. Spell research should be fun. And one of the reasons it's fun is that it's unpredictable. My all-time favorite chart is the old potion missability table. Which I wanted to roll on, not because really good things could happen, but because really good things and really bad things could happen. Sometimes simultaneously. Any result was exciting and dramatic, and even if my character exploded, I would have been delighted. Hey, Diadems, welcome! The spell research system is all about rolling on charts, because in my experience as a player, when I see charts like the potion missability table for the wild magic chart, or the old school Wand of Wonder chart, I just want to roll them. And hey, we've been having a lot of fun with the wild magic chart on Tuesdays. Well, I have. Hopefully my Tuesday players have too. In this book, all the results of spell research benefit the caster, but not all of them are equally useful, and some of them are weird, capital W. But because these benefits are rewards for building a stronghold, there are no bad results. Inventing a new spell. Inventing a new spell from scratch is sort of a pain in the ass, and it's not a core rule book, but again, the conversational style in which this is written requires a unique combination of player ingenuity and GM balancing that can be a lot of work and not all of it's fun. But researching an existing spell, taking a heretofore boring spell and making it do something extra and neat may be weird. Going into your research laboratory, and not knowing exactly what you're going to get when you come out, that's magical. And here's how it works. Here's a proposed system. So for all of you casters out there, let me know what you think. Not that I'm not secretly Matt Colville, but I'd love to have a conversation about the proposition here. Pick a spell. You can only research arcane spells, not divine spells. Gods get really bitchy if you start trying to monkey with their ineffable will. This means the spell must be on the spell list of the Bard, Eldritch Knight, Wizard, Warlock, or Sorcerer. 5th edition doesn't really have the clear division of arcane and divine spells, but you'll notice that it doesn't give clerics or druids or paladins access to spells with someone's name in the title. Named spells are apparently unique to arcane spellcasters, and we like the tradition. The GM can, of course, allow a divine character to research spells, and why not? It's just not the default assumption. Another aspect I like about this document is it does say this is what we're working on. This is what we're presuming to be in place as we are going over these rules. You must be able to cast the spell you want to research, and the spell can't have a proper name in it. You may choose to research a cantrip, but the research cantrip will be a first level spell. See Casting the Spell, page 27. Pick the target of the spell. These categories aren't comprehensive, but broadly applicable. Some spells may fall under multiple categories. Does damage applies to many spells that also fit elsewhere on the list. The goal is to let the player choose the category, and the GM interprets the exact target broadly. I think she's given up the hunt. The target of the spell can be yourself or one ally, one enemy, all bad guys in an area, all allies in an area, or the spell does damage. Some spells don't fit any of these categories, typically ones that bestow knowledge or that summon or create things. For such spells, the above list has enough effects that you could easily choose something from it, or even create a unique list by picking and choosing effects below for a player to roll. But we recommend yourself or one ally for spells that don't otherwise fit a category, since presumably the spellcaster is benefiting in some way from the spell. Researching a spell takes time and money. Let me make this a little bigger for you all. There we go. The money is spent buying arcane materials to use as prospective components. Many potential components must be tested to determine which is the proper one for this new spell. Special tomes must be procured describing the creation of the original spell, pointing the way towards a means to modify it. The time spent takes 8 hours of every day, 6 days a week. The Arcanist is able to take breaks a few times each day to speak with their lieutenant and command their followers, oversee the construction of their tower, but they spend the required time in research. If this time is interrupted, the new spell slips from their mind and they must start again. Hey, Syart, welcome. I hope you're doing well. It's almost the summer solstice for you, isn't it? Getting pretty warm, huh? Grumble, grumble, cold and wet and... Sard is working well. As I'm doing a bit of narrating in these segments, continue to work, and perhaps my hopefully soothing voice can continue to entertain you and get you through whatever project you're working on. So sit back and I'll be the driver here. I'll take us there, Syart. I'll take us there. To research a spell, the magic user must spend 1 month plus 1 week per level of the spell, minus 1 week per level of their tower. The example: Graves builds a tower and calls it the Hell Tower. He decides it would be nice if his Vampiric Touch spell was better than normal Vampiric Touches. Vampiric Touch is a 3rd level spell, and the Hell Tower is a 1st level tower. Thus, researching it will take 6 weeks, the base time of 4 weeks, plus 3 weeks because Vampiric Touch is a 3rd level spell, minus 1 week because the tower is 1st level. After picking the spell and its target, and researching it for the appropriate time, the magic user rolls a d8 on the chart corresponding to its effect to discover the result of their research. This is the default use of these rules and tends to produce the best result. If the GM and player agree, the player can just choose the effect they want, though this is much more prone to abuse, and of course the GM can roll for the player. This is a very old school way of doing things, and while it may seem less satisfying for the player, it lets the GM curate the result. The GM might, for instance, know or strongly suspect that one of the possible results would just be less satisfying for the player and make sure that the result doesn't come up. They might still roll and just pick the next or previous result on the list if they get an unsatisfactory result. The players spent a lot of their character's money and time to get this, so while some weird results can be fun, and the player should be reminded they can do more research later, the ultimate goal is to give the player a fun reward. Some of these results are weird. Control-I, italicized weird. This is by design, meant to reinforce the idea that magic is unpredictable. It's not a science. That's why they call it magic. And so here's a chart presented to you for things to consider here. The spell targets for you are an ally, the spell targets allies, or the spell targets an enemy. Maybe we can go through the minutia here. And actually, I'll tell you what. I need to go AFK real quick. I'll just leave this up on the screen for a moment, and I'll tell you what. I will return very shortly. I got to take care of something here real quick. Sorry about that. Actually, I'm going to hit the break. I'm going to hit the break, and we'll come right back. So, spell effects, empowering for 10 minutes. A random ability score increases to 20. Regenerating. Target regains hit points equal to your spell casting modifier at the start of each round. These are random effects that can occur, and feel free to modify the choices as you would like as a DM. Targets allies, dexterous, accelerating, energizing. Spell effect, betraying, beguiling, distracting. It's providing you a template from which you can work. Exposing. The target's clothing and armor disappear until the start of their next turn. Adjust AC and abilities accordingly. Oh my. How lewd. Spell targets several enemies. Defiling, roll a d6. These are just random ones I'm picking. Find your damage type on the list below. Acid, melting. Objects carried by the target are hit and take damage equal to the spell's damage. Bludgeoning and sundering. Cold chilling. Fire incinerating. Detonating, shocking. Unholy. Ooh, 1d4 ghouls rise from the ground. Each anywhere you choose within 30 feet. They obey your commands for a number of rounds equal to your spellcasting modifier, then crumble to dust. I got a result I don't like, because there's a lot of different things you can roll for or acquire if you just want to go all random. Alright, look. The whole point of this system is to reward your players for spending all the time and money, and frankly, just having the desire to build a stronghold. So, if you think there's any danger your player might reject the result. I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. So, if you think there's any danger your player might reject the result, maybe just let them pick, or roll behind the screen for them and make sure they get a result you know they'll like. The whole point of rolling is to make the result seem like fate, like it came from forces beyond you or your player's control. It helps trick us into feeling like the rules are describing a real world, but that sense of verisimilitude, ooh, good vocabulary, verisimilitude, isn't as important as the player feeling like they got a cool reward for their effort. Hey, Funny Dill, yes, we are in the Strongholds supplement, and we are currently going over the tower and how one can research new spells. Now, with what we do on the channel, I understand this point about just sort of rolling and empowering. I love rolling openly as a heads up DM, and you know, in the Tuesday game and even what we do on this channel. I want to roll openly because we can work with whatever comes up. Now, that's the attitude we're taking into the presentation of my games or the channel. And here, you know, if a player does want to create a custom spell, similar to what we're seeing here above in their research, I do understand allowing them the ability to pick the exact results that they would like. Especially because if they are going to be spending a lot of money on something, and the context of the game is I'm researching something specific, then if they've gone through the time and effort to adventure, to get everything ready, to take their time, and again, they would reject initial results that wouldn't lead to at least something close to what they'd want, then as a DM, this is encouraging you to offer that result if they've already paid in the time, money, and other resources. Yeah, and there's not a lot of rules for crafting, Funny. If you end up taking a keep that we discussed last night, instead of crafting, you attract followers. Like, you'll attract mercenaries or people who want to pledge their swords to you. You know, you can raise an army. If you have a tower, you can research new spells. Some example towers. A small tower, only 3 stories tall. Medium is 5. See, it has a nice little chamber here with a balcony. And then if we take a look here, the large tower, 7 stories tall and a cellar level. And look how far we've grown, right? We keep adding to the picture. We start out small, and this is where we end up. Including, here's a cutaway of some cellar space and a nice little coastal overlook. Hey, Volvo, welcome. Nice little observatory here. If a spyglass costs 1,000 gold pieces, my friends, imagine what that costs. In lore for my game of D&D, to graduate in the College of Magic is to have you craft your very own spell. I do like that as an idea. As you know, there are different concepts of having to take some kind of a test or pass something, or otherwise, you know, proving the application of what it is that you've studied in order to become a wizard at, you know, whatever level, depending on the edition or just the concept of the game that you're playing. So I very much like that idea, Funny Dill. A given spell can only be modified by research once, and a given magic user can only modify a number of spells equal to their tower level. Spell research cannot grant you access to spell levels your class does not have. You may research a 4th level spell to produce a 5th level spell you cannot cast yet, but will be able to once you level up. Your research shows the spells exists, but you haven't properly mastered it yet. Somewhat similar, Fluffy, to how it seems that you're running Bright, in that you have these ideas, right? You have this book of spells, and it's something that you've acquired, but the way that I'm getting your role-playing Bright is she hasn't comprehended them yet. She hasn't had a chance to really find a use to apply them, or to be able to cast them with confidence. And maybe that confidence is a part of an unspoken part of the spell's power. You have to contribute to the world of magic to prove what you learned. I like that. You're on to something, Funny Dill. Besides these limits, the player is free to do more research later. The GM should let the player live with the new spell and for a while, and if they don't like the result, forget that research and work on another spell. The goal is to empower the players and make their stronghold feel powerful and useful. If the player likes the result, they should be free to choose the same spell modifier for subsequent spell research. Example: Reginam researches Arcane Eye, spell affects yourself or ally, rolls on the appropriate chart and gets a 4. Omniscient, perfect. She now has Reginam's Omniscient Eye, or Reginam's Omniscient Eye. And the effects dovetail well. Upon returning to her tower after adventuring, she decides to research Haste, and after spending the time researching it, it should be chooses. Looks like there might be another mistype in here. To apply Omniscient to Haste without rolling, because her player feels like it makes a good combo. Once a player has a signature spell, especially after they've used it in the wild a few times, rumors of its existence begin to circulate, and eventually it's possible, even inevitable, that another spellcaster might reverse engineer how this custom spell was done and duplicate it. Scrolls of Reginam's Omniscient Eye might begin circulating. Enemy spellcasters might start using it against the heroes. Your character is automatically resistant to the effects of any spell you research. Reginam, therefore, has advantage on saving throws against Reginam's Omniscient Eye. It will still work, even against the wizard who invented it. It's just less likely to work. Does anyone know who created the first fireball spell? I do not offhand, Funny Dill. If that is known in D&D history or lore, then I don't. So I guess Diadem's some bloke. that's same. A name lost to time, says a more poetic Volvo. A name lost to the fire, the first fireball. Yeah, unfortunately it was centered on oneself, and And the delayed blast fireball was someone, maybe the assistant, who came in and said, "Whoa, hold up." Casting the spell. Now the magic user has their own spell. Valoran's blazing gaseous form. Elaine's overwhelming hypnotic pattern. The level of the final spell is one higher than the level of the original spell. If the target of a spell saves against it, the modifier automatically fails. If the target of a betraying charm person makes their wisdom save against the charm, they do not suffer the betraying effect. The effects of a modified spell cannot be combined with the effects of the unmodified spell. The temporary hit points gained from Mindful Enhance ability do not stack with Enhance ability, for instance. An enlarged character cannot be further enlarged by casting Regenerating Enlarge. Spells that can be cast as a ritual can be modified, but this does not change the duration of their effect. Empowering Commune, cast as a ritual, takes 10 minutes to cast, but the empowering benefit still only lasts 10 minutes after that. There's one other restriction. The magic user can only cast the spell a number of times equal to their spellcasting modifier. Once they do, they must take an extended rest if they want to cast the spell again. An extended rest, remember, is 1 week inside the tower. Well, in this case, we're talking about towers. So the wizard, the warlock, the bard, or the sorcerer would have to return to their tower and take an extended rest of a week or more in engaging in research, talking with their followers and such, in order to be able to use these new spells again. Yep, successfully cast Fireball, but rolled a 1 for aiming, says Diadems. Funny Dill, yeah, this opens a very big world of imagination because I'm the kind of guy to make my own spells often when thinking of things. Oh, there's so much creativity you can pour into spell making. There's so much. And so this is the benefit that a spellcaster would receive from a tower, similar to all of the martial effects that a more martial-minded character would receive from a keep. You know, with the ability to puncture heavy armor, or the ability to mitigate more damage, or all of those interesting effects that you can reset on an extended rest as well. Future use of the spell. As the magic user casts the spell and learns its new nature, the GM may discover the spell is perhaps not as useful as everyone might like, or it might be too useful. The GM is free to modify the spell over time, adjusting its effects, changing the spell level. This represents the magic user's changing understanding of the spell. Efficiencies are discovered. Some elements of the arcane formula, once clear, begin to slip from the spellcaster's mind as the spell itself twists and writhes under human attention. Once the GM deems the spell to be grown up and ready to enter the wide world outside the magic user in their tower, and presuming the player is also happy with it, remember, balance aside, the final result of this process is a reward for the player. The GM may decree that the spell is now well studied and available to other spellcasters to learn, and it can be scribed onto scrolls and copied into spellbooks. Congratulations, you have added to the growing body of spellcraft knowledge. May the gods have mercy on your victims. And here are some lovely internal tower layouts. Should you wizard folk out there choose to dabble in the arcane. The best spell I thought of, which is named Shallow Grave, that traps the target in a coffin and creates a 6-foot sphere of rock around it. And you know, funny, if you ever want to run any of those, pass some folk for advice in statting it out, or if you're trying to find the proper level or something else to discover something about your spell, you can always stop by our workshop, and we'd be happy to help you with it. Alternative tower rules. Towers by school. Here are some simple rules for towers by school, in case you don't like the spell research system. Upon finishing a tower, the magic user must dedicate it to one of the 8 schools of magic. It is traditional to give your tower a name based on the school. Like, if you choose divination, you might call your stronghold a Tower of Prophecy. Necromancy, well, a Tower of Necromancy is pretty cool, but also the Tower of Death is pretty badass. Or the Black Tower, or the Tower of Pale Flesh. You get the idea. I guess in that case, Fluffy, if you're still out there, what would Bright name her tower if she were to invest in one? I'm not saying that's happening on Tuesday, but I'd be curious to know what Bright's tower would be named. Or honestly, if any of you out there would play a spellcaster, you're welcome to put your suggestions out here. You know, what would you name your tower based on the spellcaster, or in particular the school that you are mastering? A magic user who studies at their tower for a week can prepare and cast spells from their tower's school as if the spell were cast at one level higher. Ooh. In other words, Fireball, studied by a 5th level warlock with an evocation tower, would cast as a 4th level spell and do an extra 1d6 damage, even though the warlock was using it at 3rd level. A magic user can only prepare spells in this way a number of times equal to the level of their tower. There you go. So instead of using the custom spells, if you didn't want to customize spells, then you could just simply empower the spells you have. And it operates on a similar basis. Volvo would say the Radiant Spire. And the Radiant Spire, is that evocation? Is that conjuration? Valoran finishes his tower and dedicates it to necromancy. He memorizes Bestow Curse at 3rd level. Well, when he casts it, it behaves in all other ways like a 4th level spell, extending the duration to concentration. All the necromancy spells he cast that day are cast as though they were 1 level higher, but because his tower is only 1st level, he cannot prepare his necromantic spells this way again until he spends a week in his tower. After upgrading to a 2nd level tower, he may now spend 2 days casting necromantic spells at higher level. You could, of course, decide that towers in your campaign grant both these benefits and spell research. Optional rule: effort. Another method I've used and enjoyed allows the magic user to cast their specialist spells as though they were 1 level higher with no limit, other than the normal limits of spells by level per day. But each time they cast a spell at a higher level, they must make a constitution check of DC 10 plus the spell's level. If they fail, they suffer 1 level of exhaustion. A full rest removes 1 level of exhaustion. So, there's an example for you, or an alternative for you, I should say. If you don't want to go with the recommended, here's how you can research new spells or different spells. Here's how you can empower yourself by steeping yourself in the thematic magic that you are already involved in. Oh, all right, Funny Dill, be well. Thanks for popping by. It was great having you. And it was Conjuration? Okay, Volvo. All right, now we move into the Temple. We just discussed the Arcane. Let's discuss the Divine. The Priest, the Warlock, the Druid all share something in common. They do not get their power through knowledge and study alone, but through access to a higher power. A deity, extraplanar being, or force of nature. The telepathic wild men of Ix, for example, worship Baal. Baal! An ever-raging tempest maelstrom that lies in the ocean between Vazloria and Rioja, north of the Ixian island chain. Sages claim the maelstrom is a hole between worlds, but the Ixian storm speaker shamans call Baal their god. They pray to it, and their prayers are answered with druidic spells and incantations. Divine spellcasters have little use for a tower or a keep, but they do build temples. Some are mighty churches, some are underground shrines to their dark god, and some are simple pools of crystal water surrounded by trees and blessed by rays of sunlight. Though temples come in many forms, they all share the same basic function. They grant the supplicant a direct line to the object of their worship, and the supernatural entity they call on grants them rewards in exchange for faithful service, including access to battle magic and the temporary aid of a servitor, depending on the character's concordance. And that is the mechanic. Concordance is the mechanic we're going to be getting into for temples. Concordance, the measure of how pleased your deity is with you is called concordance. If your deity is pleased enough to reward you, then you are referred to as in concordance with your deity. If they are not pleased, then you are out of concordance. Typically, there is no way to know whether you're in or out before you petition your deity. Your concordance is known only to your GM. Every deed you do that furthers your god's ethos increases your concordance and makes your god more likely to grant you a boon in battle. Failing to uphold your patron's ethos has a similarly negative consequence. A cleric's divine intervention is a much improved version of this same ability. Concordance is available to everyone, but has a downside and only grants specific rewards. Divine intervention only works for clerics, has no downside, and can potentially fix any problem. The gods consider it your responsibility to know right from wrong. If you are tricked by an enemy into doing their bidding, the gods are just as angry at you as they would be if you helped the enemy willingly. They don't pay very close attention and don't have time to evaluate the subtleties of situational ethics. Petitioning your deity. The number one way to lose concordance is to use it. As an action, you can petition your deity for aid. The GM rolls percentile dice, and depending on your character's concordance, you may receive aid, be ignored, or punished for your repeated badgering. The gods can help you, but they get really annoyed when you pester them. Each time you petition your god and make a concordance roll, you lose some concordance depending on the result you get, with no loss if you attract a servitor. Then there's a temporary penalty based on the number of times you've petitioned in the last week. Anyone can petition their deity and hope they get a reply, but unless you've been busting your ass or have a temple, there's a good chance you'll be cursed just for being annoying. Calculating concordance. Before rolling, the GM calculates the PC's concordance, a measure of how pleased their power is with them. This may be a running tally the GM has kept over the course of the adventure or calculated on the spot. The following bonuses apply to the roll. Desecrated an enemy altar, plus 10. Thwarted an enemy priest, plus 5. Converted a follower. Converted an enemy priest. Thwarted an enemy minion. Consecrated an altar. Left an enemy altar intact. Failed to uphold the tenets of the deity. Or aided an enemy priest. These bonuses apply to every roll. Every character level is plus 1%. If you own a temple, it's 15%. But each time the PC petitioned in the last week, minus 10. And each servitor type the PC summoned in the last week, minus 10. Of course, the GM can just ask the player to keep the running tally. So when they petition their deity, the GM asks, okay, what have you done for your gods since the last time you called upon them? The GM is always free to agree, disagree, or add their own bonuses or penalties. Only the GM knows what the god's real attitude is. Bonuses be damned. It is entirely possible to get a concordance over 130% between the roll and your bonus, in which case you get the 130% result. You can have negative concordance, which gives a penalty to your roll, but your result cannot be below 1. The servitor chart. Or servitor, if you prefer. If your concordance result grants you a servitor, determine which servitor arrives by choosing one from the column you rolled. The servitor you choose must be within your character or deity's purview and be approved by the GM. No matter how pious your lawful good paladin is, your god will not grant you a demon, devil, or undead, and probably nothing from Arcadia or Primordius. Fae. Well, depending, I guess. A character who summoned the servitor is informally referred to as the summoner or the petitioner, or more formally, the concordant. The latter term is what the servitors usually use. So here are some different servitors that could be summoned. We come to in the court of Arcadia, a mantis knight, an orchid count, a monarchon, an oleander dragon, an ash marshal, or a sidereal vizier. The court of all flesh, which are aberrations. Baron Malgus. By the way, these are going to be monsters that we're going to see in the back of the book. The Queen of Bones, Lord Rawl, Ursavuk, Melodar Dictum. Devils, Barb Devil, two bearded devils. Ooh, get twins. Undead, Wraith, Wights, Gas, Ghouls, etc. GMs, one option you have is to let the player roll, but you decide which row they're rolling on. The unpredictability of this can be a lot of fun, but be sure to choose thoughtfully. A druid who opposes law, like roads and civilizations, would obviously be in accord with the Court of Arcadia, but the Court of All Flesh also opposes law. Which servitor arrives may say a lot about the character doing the petitioning. Using your servitor. The summoned creature is referred to as a servitor. It arrives ready to fight and die, perhaps resentfully, for the concordant. Regardless of its attitude, a servitor only remains on the same plane as the concordant for 4 rounds plus 1 round per level of your stronghold, returning to their home dimension forthwith. Servitors who are killed in the mundane world leave their bodies behind, and their essence returns to their home plane to reform there. Servitors often bring word from the power of concordance, from the power the concordance serves, informing them of unknown dangers or otherwise making cryptic pronouncements. Feel free to imbue the servitor with personality and give them the chance during combat to interact with the heroes. Druid Groves is going to be a variant. A variant temple, the Druid's Grove gives up the bonus to concordance for owning a temple in exchange for installing a powerful spell, including spells you don't know or which might not be on the Druid's spell list, into the Grove, making it permanent. The Druid chooses one spell from the list below and spends a month in meditation. If the powers that grant them their spells are pleased with their work, they permanently install the spell the Druid requested, which can be cast once per period listed in the Grove Spells table. Reincarnate, so once per season bring someone back. Foresight once per season. Greater Restoration once per month. Heal once per month. Resurrection once per year. Ooh. Here's an example of a small temple for you. You're liking the names? Yeah, there's good stuff in here, Volvo. It is very flavorful. The spell belongs to the Grove, but is cast by the Druid. The Grove must be continuously tended. Leaving the Grove untended for a month causes it to revert to wild nature, and the spell dissipates. The Druid who founded the Grove doesn't have to be the one to tend it. A lieutenant or follower will do so. The Druid may still summon servitors during concordance. They just don't gain a bonus to the roll for owning a temple. The Grove uses different rules with different benefits. The installation of a high-level spell grants the Druid who tends the Grove power and authority. Local barons and lords may visit, hoping the Druid will aid them and cast the spell in their benefit. This is a great opportunity for some classical tit-for-tat plotting. But now it is the PC who holds the power and pronounces, quote, "I will grant you this boon if you undertake this quest for me," end quote. And the NPC cast as the character who must scurry around, trying to earn the favor of our hero. The tables have turned, huh? And here's a nice outlay for a large temple, or for a medium temple. Now here's a large. So are you digging what the strongholds are doing here? They are empowering your character, and they're doing so thematically, and they're doing it in a way that is tying you to the land. It's tying you to the story. You get these somewhat limited use powers that you have to refill, for lack of a better term. Well, to use an extended rest to be able to use them again. And this is proposing a different kind of campaign, right? It's not going to be the kind where you necessarily get to just go town to town. You can, but by ignoring your stronghold, then it could fall to the wayside. It could fall into ruin. You use up the magic that you learn there, but until you go back and refresh, you're just a normal wizard again because you haven't been back to your tower. Not all wizards have a tower, and if you do, that sets you apart from other wizards. But then you become like other wizards after a while because you haven't been back there to refresh yourself. Or in this case, to summon a servitor to fight by your side, right? By beseeching your entity. Now, interesting to note, right? Now, it doesn't say cleric. It does say the priest, the warlock, and the druid all share something in common. So this does seem to be open, similar to the tower, that a warlock, because they do receive their magic from a patron. Yeah, we're on the temple. Hey, Flump, welcome. We are on the temple, and we're going over the fact that this is a little bit more open-ended. Right? Anyone can use any of these strongholds. Although, it said for the tower, we're really looking at arcane casters. But this does include warlocks, because warlocks are not necessarily that different from a cleric, if you think about it. And yet the warlock can also get a benefit. Now, these rules say you can only get the benefit one at a time from one stronghold or another. But a warlock, interestingly enough, a warlock seems very adaptable, especially if it's a hexblade or a blade lock in some sort of way, to really be able to draw from a multitude of these strongholds to empower themselves. Whether it's through a custom spell in an arcane tower, whether it's by being granted, let's say it's a fiendish blade lock, then they might petition their patron for a devil, like a barbed devil, to appear and serve them. Or they might want to get martial characters, NPCs, to arrive at their keep. I'm not the biggest fan of the spell modification deal. I vastly preferred the alternate version at the end. Ah, yes, where you can cast your spells at a higher level, and you can do that for a number of days equal to your tower level, before having to go back and recharge. Although, if I may ask, then, since we're having a conversation about it, Flump, what was really kind of grating, or did it not seem balanced, or what was really ruffling you about the spell modification / creation option. My issues were with the mechanical aspects. I've watched a lot of Colville on YouTube, and he's really of the opinion that players should only want strongholds because they're badass. The spell modification thing felt more like, well, I have to put mechanics on it, so here are some mechanics kind of a thought, at least to you. Hey, if that's your opinion. I'm not saying that in a dismissive fashion. If that's your pickup and takeaway, and you feel that perhaps the other way to use the tower seems more authentic, that's perfectly fine. The balance aspect, well, I do agree, Flumph, and I can counter that with the fact that even this document says characters who receive the benefits of a stronghold are going to be more powerful. It will unbalance your game as a GM, or a DM in this case, and you should be aware of that. I can go back over it, Fluffy. If we're talking about the tower. There was the original presentation and an alternative for if you want to, instead of make custom spells, to focus on a school of spellcasting. Oh, gotcha, Flumph. Okay. I think I know what you're getting at. Because it does provide... It does provide the, some charts here about ways that you can modify these. But you can end up making your own if you want this. Or, honestly... and remember, too... I'm like 3 thoughts ahead of myself. Even in the DMG... it gives you flexibility to say, look, if you don't like a fireball and you want to create a cold ball, you don't have to change the level of the spell. You just change the damage type. And, in fact, it's because we have had custom spell-making workshops on the channel, I can tell you that there's, it's not that difficult, but it really is, what is the gumption to make these spells? And so the argument here is, if you have the stronghold, you're going to be more likely to want to do it because that's what you're pursuing. And so I can agree where you might say, well, I don't like the effects, or that it can be random, or that I could just choose that I want a levitating fireball or something along those lines. I don't know. Well, I guess if you're targeting yourself for an ally with that, a levitating cure spell. But you might be able to, alter things up. Hey, Zytec 2K2, I actually don't have a problem with that. I don't believe everything has to be balanced. I agree with that, Zytec. We seek balance, I think, naturally. And even this document does say a lot of times we feel that we have to be balanced, like this is like Magic the Gathering, where the sets are supposed to be balanced within each other, and then compared to other sets, etc. And in storytelling, in narration, in D&D, we keep guidelines to try and keep things equitable, maybe balanced, but nothing ever has to be balanced. There's nothing saying that you can't have a dragon that you intend the player characters to fight at level 15 appear at level 1 and have none of its stats changed. It's just to see what would happen. It's an okay framework. I'd like to see a few things reworked. I know where you're at, Zytec. The issue isn't balance. It's balance in favor of one player over another. Nobody likes feeling way weaker than their allies, yes. Again, talking from my experience from my groups, not necessarily busted in every game. Yeah, it's a great starting point. As we've been going over, this book, I mean, speaking of building strongholds, this book is built on lines in the sand. And the author, and, you know, through the play testers and all that, have given support for why they decided to build, you know, in this part of the desert and not 5 feet over. And you're like, well, what's the difference? These are the lines in the sand that they've chosen. Here's their reasoning, though the book is gracious enough to say, look, do what you're going to do at your own table. Although I would be interested in seeing a Flumfian take on these charts, or on the concept if you don't like the charts themselves. What would the Flump school of magic craft involve? Or to that end, because and so Fluffy Sheep, if you weren't here for it, there was the alternative about if you want to make your tower based on your school, what would you name your tower? Right? Upon finishing a tower, the magic user must dedicate it to one of the 8 schools of magic. It is traditional to give your tower a name based on the school. Like if you choose divination, and I winked at you, Fluffy Sheep, you might call your stronghold the Tower of Prophecy. Necromancy, well, a Tower of Necromancy is pretty cool, but also the Tower of Death is pretty badass, or the Black Tower, or the Tower of Pale Flesh. You get the idea. So Volvo supplied the name of his tower, and I'm curious about what you all would name your towers if you invested in them in this concept. A Flumfian take. Maybe I'll start a Kickstarter for it. Yes, a Flumfian philosophy. Life in a fantasy world. A Flump's perspective. You can trust me. Subtitle. Oh, you study the Flumfian school of magic and philosophy. Oh, yes, yes, yes. Very intriguing. This new wave research. Whoever would have thought? Zytec, your tower would be the Tower of Obsidian Knight. So, divination magic? Clearly, right, Zytec? I figured. I'm having fun. Straight necro. All right. Well, let's take a short break. And when we come back, I'm going to I don't know, that it's supposed to be peach tea, and it tastes just sort of like unsweetened tea. I'm not really getting the peach, so I don't know. Maybe I can add something in there to help flavor it up, and I might grab a slice of pizza too to have a snack. And when we come back, let's discuss the establishment in the next part of our exploration of strongholds and followers. Yes, in fact, Flump. I have 16 boxes, so 2 bricks, of Storm King's Thunder. Neither have been broken into yet. I have 8 boxes of Tyranny of Dragons, 8 of Dragon Heist. I have 5 Monster Menagerie 1s, I had a brick of them, but I had a couple people at the store purchase some, probably to get ready for Christmas. The usual Ravnica, and I still have Monster Menagerie 2s left, as you can see on camera too. And look what I was able to get in as well. A white Draco Lich. And this is the promo figure from Rage of Demons. As well as... oh, this is a chonky box. The Kraken. It comes with a rowboat, 2 little sandbars, a treasure chest, that ship's wheel, and a captain. It comes with a central Kraken figure and little like mini tendrils you can fight alongside it. This box is several pounds. This is a chonky box. In fact, kind of giving a little bit of a... You see there's just a wall of minis off to my side here. Alright, I will be back shortly, and we will continue the exploration of this interesting set of rules, and of course, the discussion. Are they practical? Are they not? Oh, and I'm sorry, Fluffy Sheep over here replied, I guess an evoker might go with the Towering Inferno. You could certainly apply some cool effects. You look like some, like, diesel punk, or like some Back to the Future 2, future Biff Tannen looking tower. Or, you know, have all sorts of, like, ventilating gas and stuff, and explosions, and... I like that. I like that that mental image, Fluffy Sheep. All right, I'll be right back, and we'll continue. Okay, everyone.